would want to do that? Sequels suck.
Please, by definition alone, they're inferior films.
There's always exceptions, but Mr. Meeks was right on the money with this series. The third and final installment of this trilogy released, although I wouldn't even be surprised if you weren't even aware of its release. Thank goodness we can finally put this series to rest, because this series has been chewed up, trampled over, and incinerated by this point. I don't think this series can go another round without the studio seriously considering paying people to go watch the next movie. No lie, I'm truly glad that this is the final installment in this series and that we either never go back to it again or we take a massive hiatus, because The Strangers title has been ripped to shreds because of this new trilogy. I'm a massive fan of the original and even the sequel, Strangers Prey at Night. There's plenty of people that enjoy one or the other, and there's plenty of people that are indifferent to both movies, and that's perfectly fine too. There wasn't really a substantial amount of vitriol for this title prior to this new trilogy. It's all gone to hell now because this now franchise is not only one of the worst horror franchises ever, but it's also one of the most redundant horror franchises because so much of it wasn't necessary, and it just wasn't worth it by the end. This trilogy got off on just getting a modern take of the original and giving the most boring, uninteresting, needless lore for characters that thrive off of not having lore. I truly hope Madelaine Petsch finds work after this trilogy because she's not a bad actor, but her name tied to this trilogy is gonna make her radioactive with no prospect for work. For her sake, I hope I'm wrong. Anyway, Strangers Chapter 3's marketing is the perfect depiction of the faith they had in the movie, in that there was no marketing for the movie. Like, quite literally, I didn't know the movie was releasing until the day before I went to go watch the movie. It's almost like they wanted no one to go see the movie and sneak it under the rug so they could fulfill their 3-movie deal. The fact that they released the public threat that they're considering releasing all 3 movies as one long supercut merits jail time. That would be the scariest thing to come out of these movies. As a small recap, the first of this trilogy is literally just a copy and paste of the original without any of the aura and suspense that the original had. 0% sauce. The strangers from the original were poopy pants worthy antagonists, while these new chums are goofy knockoffs. The second movie was a fever dream because absolutely nothing happens in it. Like, seriously, you could delete that entire movie and nothing in the story would change. It's watching Madelaine Petsch run around for an hour and a half until she fights a boar in the middle of a forest. But in the second movie, they also begin the deep dive into the origin of who these strangers are, summing up to Sackhead and Dollface being childhood sweethearts. That's the groundbreaking origin for the folks behind the masks. The whole is Tamara home thing was extremely random, but ultimately terrifying because of how innocuous it was in the original. It's actually just a stupid kids game that Sackhead had with his side piece. And by the end of the second movie, Maya crushes Sackhead's heart by killing Dollface, his sweetheart. What does that leave for the third movie after that crushing loss? Well, the third movie focuses on Sackhead wanting Maya to replace Dollface as his new girl, which of course is the only logical course of action at this point. The body isn't even cold and the dude is already moving on to a new girl. Some men really are bastards. I think the only pro I can give to this trilogy as a whole is the level of execution, in that all 3 are equally as bad. There isn't a better one or a worse one between the 3 movies. I will say though, the third one is probably the funniest just because of the sheer lack of effort from everyone involved. Everyone seems to be on autopilot mode and just numb to the point of not putting in any effort whatsoever. I myself was numb to the point that I don't even care about the many flaws in this movie, and clearly Renny Harlin didn't care either. Like, I could point out how Sackhead kicks down and smashes a door, and in the literal next scene the door is perfectly fine and attached to the latches, as it was before the smashing. Or how the sheriff was able to turn on dead silence so Maya's sister's car wasn't able to detect his car even though he was literally right next to them. Mind you, they were tailing him the entire time and they were right behind him. Hell, even Maya doesn't care. Half the movie she's lethargic and borderline catatonic because she doesn't say or do anything. Oh, my sister that from the beginning of this trilogy was on her way to save me was just killed right in front of me? It's fine, doesn't matter anyway. Not like you had a shotgun right there to at least try and save your sister, but no, that would make too much sense. There's a point in this movie where she's literally in a cop car with a full tank of gas and could have gotten away, but no, she needed to look for some files. Just because. The pacing in this movie is non-existent. It literally feels like it was edited by like a 5-year-old. We're jumping from 3 years ago to a couple of weeks ago to 12 years ago, and it's the most intense intense dosage of whiplash I've ever experienced. Side note, teenage Sackhead kind of reminds me of a vampire from 30 Days of Nights for some reason. Something about his eyebrows, I don't know. Anyway, the childhood sweethearts just end up being serial killers, which Rennie really wants you to know because he kindly gives us a definition of what a serial killer is. So much about this movie makes no sense, but I find it funny that this gas station is their pickup spot since childhood, because even as adults, that's where they find their victims. Small towns really do protect their own, I guess. What it boils down to is this whole trilogy dedicates itself to adding layers to the strangers and giving them a proper mythos. But it's just a weird kinky couple that gets off on killing others, asking people if Sackhead's dead ex-girlfriend is home, and rubbing each other's faces with their masks on. That's the big exploration for who the strangers are. Less is more. 9 times out of 10, over-explaining a story is gonna make it worse. Especially on a subject such as the strangers, where the intrigue that's created is based on the unknown. It's a subject that thrives on vagueness and blurriness, so over-explaining is quite literally the worst thing Renny Harlin could have chosen to do. I will say the scene where Maya is seeing Sackhead's Shrine of Dollface, the music did not need to go so hard for such a generic revelation. There's also this weird thing about this movie where there's like literally no dialogue. Like for so much of the movie, no one is talking. In terms of the effects, there's blood, I guess, but the effects looked bad and the deputy getting skewered looked awful. Maybe the whole numb vibe this movie was going for was intentional, because ultimately Maya ends up being forced to become a stranger temporarily, yet ends up killing Sackhead in the most unsatisfying way possible. Even the possibility of any sort of romantic connection between the two is offensive and disrespectful to the viewer. Which, stabbing him by the way, also seems to give him the most euphoric experience ever. There's just no layers to these strangers. Legit, they feel so flat and one-dimensional that I'd actually be impressed if the team think they gave the strangers that lore that they so desperately wanted to give them. I truly can't with this new trilogy, and honestly, it's the worst modern horror trilogy with miles of room ahead of second place. That's all I got. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.